Of a question about the Hebrews. It's wonderful. So, I'm going to just do a Hebrew video. Um, the In the last diaspora of the Hebrews, the marauders came in from the east to the west through the center of Israel, separating the 10 tribes from the 2 tribes. The 2 tribes went into Africa, where the tribes always used to hide before because they blended in. And the 10 tribes, the lost tribes, tried to go into Europe, but they stuck out like a sore thumb, and they weren't wanted there. That's what diaspora means. And actually, this was happening in Africa for the first time as well, to the southern tribes, where they were also, every time they settled, the locals kicked them out, and they got pushed all the way down to the very southern part of Africa. And the other 10 tribes, and then they went into the slave trade from that part of Africa. Most of them. There's 2 tribes left, I believe. One of them got rights to actually go back to Israel. They got their rights as Israelites, and their tribe is actually back in Israel now, but they had to go into the army, and there was all kinds of stipulations. Anyway, the 10 tribes um, kept getting pushed as well, diaspora. So they got pushed right across Northern Europe, or whatever, the known land, right? And and eventually would have made it over like to China area. People think that the Japanese are probably from Israel as well, and it makes sense because the thing about human DNA and all of our DNA is that we started with 2 of the kind, right? And then we got on Noah's Ark, but it was back down to just 2 of the kind. Well, those 2, except for the 8 humans, and a few birds and things, but those 2 carried the DNA for all the other kinds. Their DNA had a ton of information in it. And then when you have kids, the kid gets a little bit of that DNA, a little bit of this information, and there's a loss of information. Right? So that's why, like, Esau was so different looking. He came out red or whatever, and hairy all over, and so they called him Esau. And so, because that means hairy, that's what the name is, red and hairy. Uh, anyway, they so the same thing with human DNA, where Abraham, um, Shem, sorry, was Abraham's father or grandfather, whatever, great grandfather, I believe it was, and so he probably carried, coming off Noah's Ark, he would have been carrying a ton of all that information. God would have made sure of it. You know, everything that was picked to go on the ark was the perfect, closest to the perfect pair. Again, like, he picked that pair, handpicked by God himself to get onto that ark. Like, that's not just any of the animals. You know what I mean? He picked the ones that have all the DNA markers. Same with the people. So Shem could have had children of all different races. So technically, Jacob's 12 sons could have all been very different looking. There could have been one that was Chinese or Japanese looking, like an Asian looking, and a more African looking, and a more, no problem. White, red, brown, pink, purple, who knows? No, it wouldn't have been pink or purple. DNA couldn't do things back then that it can't do now, except it carried more of the information. Your DNA still carries a ton of information. You could fill the entire Grand Canyon with books if you wrote out the code that is your DNA, and yours is different than mine, and it's different than theirs, and theirs, and theirs, and theirs, and theirs. Everybody's unique. That's how you get your characteristics, your hair color, your shape of your face, the bone density, you're skinny, you're tall, you're fat, you're small, whatever, right? It's all in that code. And then, like, you can carry dormant genes. Like, I carry the blue-eyed gene because my mom, she has brown eyes. Her mother has blue eyes. So she carried the gene. And my dad has blue eyes. So he carried the gene, obviously. He doesn't even carry brown. So I carry blue, but I have brown eyes because I also carry the brown. I carry both. My sister has blue eyes, and so she doesn't carry the brown gene. She only has the blue, right? Now, if you have two brown-eyed parents, the grandparents have to have blue eyes in order for the kid to carry the gene. If you go 2 or 3 generations, then it is lost in that bloodline, in that family. That's how you can evolve. But you're not evolving. You're cutting information out. Selective breeding is what it's called. It's adaptation at best, right? Like polar bears are white. At one time, they all weren't white. It's just the fucking black ones didn't get fucked. They had to move, right? In order to get... So they all went down into the woods, where all of a sudden the blackness was a good fucking thing, and then the white ones didn't get fucked. That's why they're more ferocious, because they're pissed off. They had to go up north. No, just joking. Anyway... So, the 10 tribes, this is going to get really technical, of course, but it has to. There's actually a walking trail under the ocean that we found, and like we can see the footprints, kind of thing, and like tire tracks and cows and all that kind of shit. Like, people went over this trail for years, generations, whatever, and it's just under the ocean, 20 feet or whatever it is. It's under the ocean a good amount, but that goes from Europe to North America. So at one time in history, people could walk there, obviously, right? Now there's also a lake called Grand Lake and a lake called Hopi Lake, and they're extinct. They're gone. But if you filled in Grand Canyon, they would come back. We can see the beach lines, and it actually covers 3 states in water when you fill in the Grand Canyon. And there's no delta at the Grand Canyon, so that explains the no delta. And so after the flood, waters dropped past the Grand Canyon wall, and but then at some point it got over the wall, and if you've ever made a dam before, you know that it cut it out, and that would have dropped the ocean up. Now, same thing goes with the border of New Brunswick to Quebec. Right at that border, you can see that there was a flood there at some point, and like the way the rock formations are, you can see the washouts, and where there was big rocks, the heavier rocks were left behind, like huge mountains, and then the big washouts all in between in this area, and then there's 2 big hills running down the side of the highway for about 3 hours, 3.5, maybe 4 hours, and on the highway, and and you're just in a big riverbed, like a big shallow, and you can just see it. It's such an easy. I'm sure you could go there and find the beaches up at the top of those hills. Anyway, and apparently there's other ones all over the earth. So that definitely was enough. And if you took that amount of water out of the ocean, you could also walk to Australia or to anywhere in the world, right? So, so the Hebrews came over to North America, and now they would have went right past Japan and all that at one point, and probably got pushed out and had to go north, right? And so that they could have wars, stealing people, stealing children, or the Japanese could be Hebrew. I have no idea about that. That's just something I've only just heard about. I always thought if all the Hebrews were similarly darker in color, then they would have just taken Chinese brides and Japanese brides because they're beautiful, and concubines and things like that, and that's where the Native Americans came from. Because if you look at like all their features, their hair, their eye shape, color, everything about them is African American and Japan or Chinese, like that. It looks like that's where they are. But who's to say about that either? How that all works? You could find the markers, the DNA markers and stuff. They're proving it all the time. My church get all the Hebrews in my church. They're all encouraged to get the DNA background check, and they can find out which tribe you were from and all that stuff. At least to some extent. So the Hebrews are, and then, the 10 tribes came over to North America. All they went for a swim in the Grand Canyon, and it overflowed. Right? Who knows? And cut off the route so that nobody else could follow them to kill them. And then Christopher Columbus got their hands on, and then those people, the Edomites, got their hands on gunpowder, figured that they could kill Jacob, didn't know where the 2 tribes were, but wanted to go find the other 10 and kill them. And that's why we came here, to, colonize America. That's a theory as well. Who knows? But Christopher Columbus did bring Hebrew translators, and there's a whole story about that where they tried every language. The Indians never got it. And then they were talking Hebrew amongst themselves, and the native came right over and started talking to them in Hebrew, which doesn't make any sense, because if they're language specialists and the natives are talking to them in some language, they would have noticed that it was similar to Hebrew right off the get-go. You wouldn't have had to try every other language. And then the native be like, oh, you guys are speaking my language, come right over and talk to them in Hebrew. No. It would have been like, holy shit, these natives are talking Hebrew, and they all talked Hebrew, you know what I mean? It's just a likely story that they kind of... Anyway, that it was it was the last straw resort that they tried. Who'd have thought? So, Uh, so that brings me to the Edomites, the false Jews. Uh, it was during the Maccabees that after Simon died, his son Jonathan the second or whatever, because his uncle's name was Jonathan, took over, and his oldest brother Judah was the hammer. Jonathan was the lion, I believe, and I think that was his nickname. And he grew the lands even more of Israel and took back all their borders, but he also took over all the land of Edom. And he told the Edomites that you either had to convert or beat it. And so a lot of them converted to Judaism, got circumcised, and started living by the laws. And it says in the Maccabees, they were no different from the Jews from that point on. And then all the sects start coming up. What they call the separations of Judaism, where Pharisees and the Sadducees, and there was a third one that disappeared. But they tore it up, and they started to break it all up in there, and they were the ones, charging people, and they kind of took over the whole thing. Took over the whole shooting match or whatever. So, anyway, it was very, very fascinating to learn all this stuff. Like I said, I was blessed to find the School of the Hebrews. I had already proved young Earth by disproving carbon dating and the geologic timescales, circular reasoning, and it's found in the wrong order. 80%. It's not found. It's non-existent. It's just a fucking feeble thing made up. And they find layers in that order once or twice on Earth. I think they found it 20 times or something like that in all of Earth or whatever. Like it's not science, and they call it science. And all the radiometric datings and all that shit all refer back to that stupid geologic timescale and even the ice thing and the like glaciers and all that stuff. The math on that's all fucking made up. And so the flat Earth wasn't a big. It was a big deal to me. I was pissed off about it a little bit at first because I was saying, you guys are picking the wrong battle. They're not going to go all the way flat Earth. Let's first show them young Earth and then baby step it, right? Like, come on. Even if you guys are right, and you're not, was what I was saying at the time. And, but then I went out and started really researching it, and, yeah, anyway, here we are. So, within a couple of years, it had really helped my walk. Like, I was getting really hot, right on God's heels, and praying and going, and then I said, I need a church, Father. I need a flat Earth church, and then I prayed for it, and then I went and looked for it, and there it was, boom, and it was more than just that. That church has been such a blessing. It was 5-6 times more than anything I could have prayed for. It was. I couldn't have comprehended how much this church could have done for me in order to come up with the prayer big enough for that blessing. Like, I wouldn't have been able to put that into words. Still couldn't, I don't think, because there's so much. He is so full of the Holy Ghost, and it just pours out of him. And then educated through the roof, and fun to listen to. I just love that church, and it's changed my life totally. My blessing, my walk, my everything, just right on point with Pastor Omar. He is the man. And not just him, the whole church. All the everybody coming up behind him that are just getting their feet wet and stuff. There's a few of them that I just love to listen to. Just love to listen to them. And so Minister Hance and stuff, like, just, I don't know, Brent and the whole worship team and stuff. Highly recommend it. And go back in time and just start, go to like, subscribe, go to his channel, go to the videos, say oldest to youngest, change the list around, and just start at the oldest ones and start watching through. And then at the same time on Sundays, jump to the future and start watching and watch them to come together. And I'll tell you, man, your blessings and everything, like, just your walk, everything is gonna change. Everything will change. And still working on breakthrough, but I get blessings through the roof all the time that I never ever would have gotten, and I've changed my life around big time. And just love it. I love talking about it. I love everything about God, the universe, cosmology, geology, and just so fascinating, so wonderful, and it's a little gratifying to know that he's right there. He's right there, and he's looking down. You're like, you and I were about this big to him. That's what it says in the Bible. We're grasshoppers, right? It's about a grasshopper. And he's sitting and looking over all of creation, whatever, how big it is to him. It'd be huge. And there's billions of souls. 7 billion. And then one's killed and destroyed and new ones brought in, and every day all kinds going on. He adopted you, right? And you reach down and he said, that one. That's one. I like that one over there, right? Mind shattering. Anyway, that church was just an amazing blessing, and I couldn't possibly say enough positive things about them ever. When you read the Bushudo Code, it talks about how when Japanese people give a gift, they'll say that, here's my horrible gift to you. And you'd think, in our language, you think, what do you mean? It's a horrible gift. Why are you giving me something horrible? And the way it is that your value is so much that no gift would ever be good enough for me to give to you that would ever compare to the gift that you are to me. But this is the best that I could do with my budget and limited mind capacity. This is the best gift that I could come up with to give to you. But it's not good enough for you because you are so great. And so I hope I explained that well. I think I did. Beautiful book. What a wonderful culture. I love Japan, Japanese. which is why I'm so easy to say, okay, yeah, they're Hebrews. Right? That's why I'm so quick to say that, I guess, because just so much about their culture and their way of doing and thinking. But they don't do God. They do Jesus. And the Bushido Code even talks about Jesus and stuff. Most of it was written before, because he also talks about how every culture and has a new or a Old Testament that is unique to the culture, but it always leads to God and to Jesus and to being saved. And all of those Old Testaments led to the New Testament, and that's what he followed. Obviously, he was Christian as well. Or not obviously, I guess. Beautifully, I guess. He was a Christian as well. Yeah. So, it's my Hebrew video, I think. I think I covered most things. Except for two things. One is a racist word. I don't really like to say it because we all like to give words power for some fucked up reason. I don't like saying fuck because it's a stupid word. In that, not using a variety of words, trying to use the same word in many places, dulls your mind. If you're trying to use a different word, a different adjective every time, then it's harder. You're exercising your brain. When you just say fuck all the time, then it's just stupid. So there's three things. That was one, I think. Anyway, the racist word. When the southern two tribes got pushed to southern Africa in the diaspora, they got pushed to a place called Negroland, and then that's where the word came from. So when calling them that, it'd be like calling me a dirty Canadian. It's the equivalent to that word, and that's why they used it. And they wanted to take away the culture of the Hebrew and make them think that they were from that land. And that's why it's a racist word, because it was used as a tool to take away your heritage, not because it's inherently racist to say that you're, I guess it's culturist, I guess, or locationist to say that you're from a location or whatever. It's not a race that's from a particular location, though I guess it was back then. Anyway, I digest. And then reparations. I don't like that word. It's an Edomite word. There was an Edomite who was interviewed, or Jew, white Jew, and he said that the Jew is always quick to advise the African. He used a different word, but they never advised them to do what they would do in that situation. So the Jew's always there to come right over to the natural Hebrew and says, I got all kinds of advice for you. Protest, bitch, whine, do this, do that. But it's never what they would do in that situation. They don't say invest. They don't say buy. They don't say work hard, save up your money, and invest in that. And then you make the rules because you own it. And then you can say to them, no, you can't do this or come here or whatever. Well, the reparations is the same thing. And Pastor Omar should really, really click to this one if he ever hears it. If you had 3 kids, right, and say your oldest kid got into trouble, I'm just going to use, let's say they didn't do your chores for their allowance, and whatever, they were in a bad mood that week and they didn't pull their weight, and the younger 2 kids pulled the weight for them and you did some of the work yourself. And then at the end of the week, allowance time comes around and you take their allowance and you split it between the 2 kids. You say, yeah, no, they did the work. They get your allowance for the week because you were being disrespectful. So I'm not going to spank your ass. I'm going to take away some money. And then you leave the room and you peek in the door. And the oldest kid goes over to the younger 2 and says, give me my money. You owe it to me. Give it to me. My reparations. Now. You'd come through that door, tear that kid a new one. Now, new situation. Same situation. You peek in the door. The 2 younger ones go to the older child and say, you had a bad week. It's okay. We love you. And we want to bless you. Here's your money. Right? You would cry. Right there. You wouldn't be able to go into the room. You'd be so proud of your kids, right? Well, that's us blessing the Hebrews because you're the Hebrews. My tithes, offerings go to the church. When I make money, they go to the Hebrews. Even though I'll go to other churches, I'll tithe there too, but I don't tithe. My main tithe always goes to the church. And so, same thing. That's us saying, you're the Hebrews.